Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien on Saturday, June 10th, 2023. The Belmont Stakes, but they don't mean anything because nobody has won the first two races. So here we are, another year. Anyway, sitting here for Paul Harvey this morning. Stand by for a special commentary. Well, Americans, if Mr. Paul Harvey were alive here today and doing his Saturday commentary, which he used to do, those were the special ones. I used to love his Saturday commentaries because they were much more enhanced than the weekly ones. The weekly ones, he was doing them on the rush because he had the news time to report to. On Saturday, he did most of his rest of the stories and special commentary. So today, if you can hear me, Mr. Paul Harvey, up with the boss and my wife, here is a special commentary devoted to you and how you would see it today. The state of American society. Well, Mr. Harvey, this is your specially favorite alien here, reporting on the state of American society on June 10th, 2023. And if you were alive today, you would be flabbergasted, disgusted, and wondering what the heck happened since 1965 when you did the letter from God. And when you explain to Americans about their ancestors with the blood, sweat, and tears. They never got that, by the way. And you try to explain to them that a society is based on foundations. Now they're trying to destroy each other. They're naming everything that was Confederate and not realizing what the Confederacy meant for the United States as a whole. And that is terrible. I mean, they even changed Fort Hood, Mr. Harvey. Can you imagine changing the name of Fort Hood in Texas because he was a Confederate? And they're taking down Robert E. Lee's picture and statues and all Confederate statues. Well, I should take out all Martin Luther King statues down too. Because there's going to be a time when that's going to happen. Based on the mentality that the Americans have today. You tried to warn them about this mentality back when you said testing time. They just don't understand, Mr. Harvey, and they never comprehend. They still got watermelons in their brains. You know, today's state of American society, social is a disaster. You don't say good morning to everybody else. They don't even handshake because they think that's a dirty thing. It might give you COVID or something like that. Now they pump fist. You should see that, Mr. Harvey. Oh, boy. Pump fist each other. Oh, boy, really? How about, Hi-yo, Hitler? That's almost as good as pump fist, isn't it? See what I mean? So, you know, the state of their social structure. They don't have a family structure anymore. It's what I can get from anybody else, and screw them, I'll take what I can get and throw him down to the garbage. That's the way they look at it. That's their social structure. Ain't that terrible, Mr. Harvey? Yeah. Their financial structure. They're no longer a consuming nation. They're no longer a producing nation. They are a, how can I get this for that, and what do I have to sell, and what soul do I have to sell to get that? That's what they are today. Remember when they used to be a producing and a consuming nation? Producing nation towards the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, they produced everything. The world has long passed them in that respect. I mean, you got countries that produce better cars than the Americans. And at one time, the American car was it. Remember that? Yeah. Pretty soon, there'll be China will outlast the United States producing better airplanes, better space vehicles. But China doesn't know what they're doing because they're burning their candle at both ends, same as the United States started doing after World War II, burning their candles at both ends. And guess what? They don't have any ends to burn anymore. Their political structure. Remember when I used to say two-party system was the best in the world? The two-party system is destroying the American economy. It's destroying the American social structure. It's destroying the American financial structure. It's destroying the American soul. Can you imagine that, Mr. Harvey? Would you, if you had lived past 2009 to here in 23, you would have been appalled at what you saw here. Here you got a president that's been indicted twice, a former president. And then you got a sitting president that has a special counsel looking at him for taking documents into his house. And a former vice president, and sure they said, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about no more because we eliminated that. Really? To me there's something going on here because the way they're doing President Trump, and I'm not a fan of Trump's. I dislike him with a passion. But the way that the Department of Justice has gone around to do this on Trump and not the other two presidents, they should have at least slapped him with a wrist for doing this. President Biden and Vice President Pence should have been slapped. Vice President Pence says you cannot run this term for president because you got this issue here. Slap him on the fist. 4 years that you can't do it. President Biden, you get slapped on the wrist. Well, you can't run for president for re-election because you got this. And President Trump, never could you be in politics again. But they don't do that, Mr. Harvey. They don't realize that they got to look at the American structure and the American people. They answer to them. Charges against President Trump is not going to help anything. It's going to divide the divide that's even worse. You got extremist Republicans and extremist Democrats. And the so-called independent voters that don't know what the hell they're doing because they keep on voting the jokers time after time. In 2024, the same stupid jokers that are there now are going to be there. Different names, of course. But some of them are going to be there again. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be voted back in Georgia. And Mr. Durbin's going to be voted back in wherever he's from. You know, heck, McCarthy, he'll be voted back in. Maybe not, because he's having trouble with his Republicans. See, Mr. Harvey, this is the problem that you have. And the Joe Blow on the street, the American citizen. They don't even know what the hell is going on. Because their so-called representatives have destroyed the Constitution and destroyed what the Declaration of Independence stand for and the Constitution. They forget that those two documents were their prime directive and their doctrine. And they have destroyed that. You know, like I said, they're going after the Confederacy because they figured that, oh, well, that was racist. Really? The Confederacy has a lot to teach the descendants over 160 years later since that war ended. And you have learned absolutely nothing about it. You have learned absolutely nothing about World War II. And you definitely have learned nothing about Vietnam, let alone the newer wars. See what I mean, Mr. Harvey? The American citizen is absolutely dumb. He doesn't know what the hell is going on. But he's busy because he's got to somehow keep himself afloat. I mean, $1, you could have bought a hamburger 10 years ago, Try to buy a hamburger for $1 today. Is there such thing as a hamburger and French fries and a Coke for $2? No. Now they got $5 meals that they put on TV today. And you Americans don't seem to understand that it's eating you up from the inside out. And every year it gets worse, not better. Because the people that you send up to your so-called Congress don't do a thing about it. Your debt is up to $31 trillion. And you got to take the castor oil in order to bring it down and bring your country back to normal. But you don't want to take the castor oil because it's a bitter pill to take. So therefore, you are on a consensus and a road to disintegration, as Mr. Harvey would have told you back in 1965. He warned you about this. See, Mr. Harvey, if you're listening up there with the boss, you'll see what I mean. Everything about the American society is in shambles. Back in 1965, it was starting to go. Remember that you warned about Medicare and you warned about the Social Security system. It was set up for a different reason back in 1935. FDR was just driving at straws and he needed something to do. But he never thought ahead. None of his successors have fought ahead. How is this going to affect our descendants 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 decades down the line, 100 years? None of them have ever looked at it this way. And you have to, because every decision you make has consequences. The law of unintended consequences. You won't know it. It's like Mrs. Pelosi. Remember her, Mr. Harvey? You were talking about her in 2009 when she was just a minor little congresswoman from California. Well, she became head of the Democratic Party and became Speaker of the House twice and destroyed the House. And her successor on the Republican side, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Boehner, oh boy, those were bad guys. They were almost as bad as, remember, Mr. Wright from Texas when he ran the Congress as a Democrat? Oh boy. And you were having fun with him back in those days, remember? See, Mr. Harvey? I mean, over here, they don't understand the fact of what's going on. They don't understand that when Richard Nixon won the second election in 1972, Mr. Spiro Agnew was already in trouble because of tax evasion. So soon after he took office in 1973 for the second term, he had to resign with no contest to that. So they did what every other people did since 1854. Whether you were Democrat or Republican, you put a dum-dum that's causing you problems in the vice presidency and they won't cause any problems. Really? And they forgot about the history. Look who they did. In 1840, Tippy Canoe won the race, but they needed a guy that was causing a lot of problems, John Tyler, so they put him in as president, so he became Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. And, Tippy Canoe went over there, did his oratory for 2 hours and got himself pneumonia sick and kicked the bucket 30 days later. And then you had John Tyler for another 4 years. And that was, repeated again in 1848 because they didn't know what to do with Millard Fillmore. So they put up as this running mate for old Rough and Ready. And Rough and Ready kind of ate something bad, and he kicked the bucket in 1850. So you had old Millard Fillmore, and you got the Compromise of 1850, which Rough and Ready would never sign, and he did, and the Civil War, yeah. And then you had the mistake that Abraham Lincoln made. he put Johnson for a conciliatory ticket in 1864 because he was a Democrat from Tennessee. Johnson turned out to be a disaster. He caused 100 years of pain for the U.S. Yeah. Oh boy. And the same thing in 1900. McKinley, he couldn't stand old Teddy because Teddy was running around sabering everybody, the old Rough Riders, yoo-hoo! Yeah. So they stuck him in the second in the ticket in 1900. 1901, somebody decided to shoot old McKinley, and because he was fat, yeah, that's what caused it. Because the doctors did a good job of taking the bullets out of him, but they forgot that in those days you got to make sure that the wound doesn't get infected, and because he was fat, it got infected worse than it should have been, and he kicked the bucket, poor guy. So then you got old Teddy, oh boy, and he really did a job from 1901 to 09, didn't he? And then he came back in 1912 and really messed up, getting Woodrow Wilson. Oh boy, see what I mean? This is packed Americans. You don't understand how it affected you. And it happened again in 1944, where you needed a guy that was put in by the mob of Missouri, Mr. Give him hell, Harry. So Roosevelt put him in there, and then he had a stroke in 1945, and you had Give him hell, Harry, who won on his own right in 1948. So he wasn't exactly a bad guy, but everybody thought he was because he was, Mr. Pendergast's guy. Yeah. And then again in 1960, Johnson was a pain in the neck from Texas, and the Kennedys just didn't like him, so they put him in as a second thing. 1963, oh boy, you know what happened there. And Johnson inherited Kennedy's mistakes, and he tried everything he could to get him right, but everything he did backfired on him, poor guy. And Vietnam ended up killing him in 1973. Because he died of a broken heart. Poor guy. And he tried everything he could for an extremist Democrat who was as racist as they came back in the 1930s to get together with Martin Luther King and put the Voting Act of 1965. That took guts. But you don't see that, Americans. No. Today you don't. That's why you're heading towards disintegration. And you don't understand what your problem is. You have to sit down and take stock and say, hey, look at this. My dollar doesn't buy anything anymore. You try to buy a car, it's $20,000 or $40,000 if you need an electric. And the Biden administration is pushing that so much that they forget there is no successor for oil yet. Electricity is not going to do it. It's just a stopgap measure. You're going to find a polaric energy source or a fusion source. And you don't even have fusion yet. My society went through that in my home planet. And they got destroyed because they went through antimatter. Wrong thing to do. They started with polaric energy and switched to antimatter. And boy, 14 billion of them paid the price. See what I mean, Americans? That's where you're headed. Until you get your social, your economic, your family, and all your other parts together, and the petty differences that you have with the colors that you have here, pigmentations, and political discord. Politics will kill you. You shouldn't have politics as a governing factor in your government. But you do, and it's killing you. This is your favorite alien sitting in for Paul Harvey. And Mr. Harvey, if you can hear me up there with the boss, you can understand what I'm saying. Your country is beyond recovery. I don't think they have it in them to recover. Good day.